The first season of Supercars Gen 3 may have come to a close, but the news keeps on rolling in. I wanted to take a sit down, talk about some of those key headlines since the checkered flag fell in Adelaide, and start building that anticipation as we start looking towards 2024. We'll kick off with a spicy one. It seems only fitting that in a year as controversial as 2023 that we finish up with yet more drama. And the drama comes in the form of Adrian Burgess, who has been subject to a lot of attention recently. He has been Supercars' head of motorsport for a number of years now, was pivotal in the development of Gen 3, and around Adelaide it was announced he would be leaving his role with Supercars, which isn't a problem in itself. However, where he was rumoured to be going was a problem for a lot of people. It was since confirmed that he's on his way to join Team 18, one of the competitors in the Camaros for next year, in a leadership position, and this caused problems on two fronts, one of which is being addressed, which he was originally still meant to oversee the wind tunnel testing for Supercars prior to leaving his leadership role. That was since addressed. Tim Edwards, his replacement, was sort of called up early to now oversee that process, which I think is fair given the conflict of interest that existed there. The second issue, and the one that still hasn't really been addressed, is that a lot of teams are really upset that Adrian Burgess, in a highly privileged role with Supercars, is able to switch to a team and become a competitor again so soon, especially given the amount of insight he has into Gen 3 and how the teams run their cars and all that information. Being able to take that to a single team in a competitive role, certainly has raised a few eyebrows and frustrations. For me, it's a bit of a tricky one. I definitely see why the teams are frustrated. If there's nothing in his contract to say that he didn't need gardening leave or something like that, I think it's just unfortunately the way the cookie has crumbled, and Supercars should probably work with the teams to develop some sort of clause to prevent something like this happening in the future. I suspect this one's just going to go down the way it's going to go down, but yeah, there's going to be plenty of needle off track, I think, in 2024 if he does indeed start with Team 18 as soon as expected. And that brings us to the wind tunnel testing, a milestone in the history of Supercars, in my opinion, something that the fans and certainly more recently the manufacturers have been just crying out to have happen, and fortunately it has finally gone down. Supercars sent a Camaro and a Mustang to America to the Windshear wind tunnel facility, and that's 3 days of testing there. The first day was to kind of work out sort of where the cars were at, and Tim Edwards described them as very close on the data. However, it does sound like there certainly was still a disparity that was found. The second day sounded like it was more for experimentation, how they can try and level these cars out aerodynamically, and the third day was indeed reaching a solution. And the most crucial piece of news out of all that and all that expense and time and anticipation is that it sounds like GM, Ford and Supercars have all agreed that parity appears to have been reached. So it's not a silver bullet, but it certainly sounds like everyone is a lot more confident compared to the VCAT process, which Supercars used to use and arguably led to a lot of the parity issues we saw this year. So yeah, very, very promising. It sounds like on the surface that the investment has been worth it, and we'll find out when the cars hit the track in February next year. There is, of course, another part of the parity puzzle though, and that is the engines, and transient dyno testing is expected to get started very soon as well. So hopefully they get similar positive results and similar parity results there, and that we can get next year's championship underway nice and close between the two brands. Of course, parity isn't the only pain point with Gen 3. There's been a few other issues with the new cars, one of which that has been a recurring factor is the steering racks. They've been subject to a lot of damage and failure throughout the season, which has really hurt the race results for a lot of teams. And yeah, they were described by Tim Edwards as at one point as not fit for purpose. So it's good to hear that some progress is being made here. I actually learned reading a Speed Cafe article, it sounds like Thomas Randle used an alternative rack on the Gold Coast to do some testing for Supercars. Not sure if that was in competitive sessions or just practice. Needless to say, testing has continued throughout 2023. And after Adelaide, it sounds like Brad Jones Racing did some postseason steering rack testing for Supercars as well. It sounds like the avenue they're heading towards is simply upgrading and beefing up the existing steering racks they have been using rather than than replacing them with a whole new brand or design altogether, obviously to save money. And for me, if they can upgrade what they already have, as they've done for a lot of components in Gen 3 to strengthen them up, that seems like a great solution. And fingers crossed we don't see so many failures in 2024. Let's get into some calendar chat now. It sounds like the Newcastle 500 may be gone for good. Now, this event was obviously cancelled for 2024. It got caught up in some local political turmoil and some opposition from residents that has been quite long-standing actually, who live in or near that street circuit. Supercars were adamant that the door was open for that event to return in 2025 onwards. However, I never felt all that confident about it, and that sort of lack of confidence has been confirmed. It sounds like the local council there have voted to reinstate the sort of last sector back to what it was before Supercars rolled up with that event. So a lot of the infrastructure, including part of the circuit itself, is being demolished. And I think that pretty much puts the Newcastle 500 to bed. A bit of a shame, because I know not everyone's a fan of street circuits. I actually really like them for Supercars in particular, and this one was pretty special with some of the sort of scenes that we could get. It wasn't always the best for racing, I'll be the first to admit that, but it was a pretty special event, especially as someone watching on TV. This, of course, created an awkward start for 2024, Bathurst being parachuted in as a last-minute replacement in the form of a sprint event. However, it will be interesting to see what Supercars do in the long run with Newcastle apparently off the cards for good. The surprising solution for Newcastle dropping off the calendar could be a country town called Cessnock, located only about 50 kilometers inland from Newcastle, and they actually stepped up to propose the Wine Country 500 is the event they're proposing, which would be a supercar street circuit race around their town, which has a population of about 20,000 people. To put that in perspective, that's about half the population of Bathurst during a non-race weekend. And this is an interesting one. I actually quite like the sound of this. I wasn't too sure how serious they were to start off with, but it sounds like discussions with Supercars are ongoing, and they're even exploring what the track could potentially look like. For me, it sounds like it checks all the boxes of Newcastle, maybe in not such a eye-grabbing location, but certainly with its own natural beauty, and it's got a lot of local support, which of course was one of the big factors that led to Newcastle's demise. So for me, I'm curious to see how this one develops. It could be a very unique event, which is a big thing Supercars are always going on about, that each event has to be unique and contribute to the championship in some sort of special way. And for me, this one sounds really promising, so I'm keen to see how it continues to develop. In further speculation about the calendar, there's a lot of rumors about Qatar at the moment. It sounds like Supercars are pretty hell-bent on going international again, which I'm not actually fundamentally against, providing they do it in the right way. And that's a discussion, I think, for another video where we can really delve deep into it and I can share my thoughts in a bit more detail. But the rumors around Qatar are absolutely wild. It sounds like there's a new plan every day of the week. And this would, in theory, be possible for 2024 in some sort of form, as Qatar, the Formula 1 event Supercars would be supporting, takes place about 2 weeks after the last race in Adelaide. Not a huge amount of time to get halfway across the world, but doable. What the event actually looks like, though, is the interesting point. We've had rumors that it will be a full grid, 24 cars all going over for a non-championship event. We've also had rumors that it will be a half grid that head over there, 12 cars doing a demonstration race or multiple demonstration races. It really is interesting to see where this one might go. Now, for me, as I say, I'm not fundamentally against Supercars going overseas. However, I have some pretty strong feelings about what kind of events and tracks they should be going to. And for me, Qatar just doesn't tick the box as one of those events that I think would showcase the sport in the best light. Finishing up with some driver news, Jack Perkins, who has co-driven with Will Brown at Erebus for the past few Enduro seasons, is on his way to new pastures. He's on his way to Blanchard Racing Team as they expand to 2 cars next year, once again in a co-driver position. This one surprised me, if I'm honest. I thought, despite Will Brown heading over to Red Bull next year, I thought Jack would have stuck with Erebus. Not necessarily the case. However, Hazelwood has been linked to join Erebus next year, and that's good news because he's without a full-time drive next year, so it's good to see some of these really popular characters staying on the grid in some sort of form. And the last piece of news isn't exactly a surprise, but Cameron Waters and Thomas Randle have finally been officially confirmed as Tickford's drivers for next season. That team's obviously downsizing from 4 to 2 cars. They're losing James Courtney and Declan Fraser, but they're keeping Waters and Randle, who I think have been the strongest performers for quite a few seasons, let alone since Gen 3 rocked up. And Thomas Randle, I'm really pleased to see hang around and sort of solidify himself in that team as well. He's always had amazing potential, and he seems to be showing that potential more and more since these new cars arrived. But they have been just some of the key Supercars headlines since Adelaide and the checkered flag fell. This will probably be my last video for the year, so thank you so much for your support. And as we continue the off-season, I want to delve into some of these more interesting and deeper topics where we can go off in a range of directions, like this rumoured event in Cessnock, the potential international expansion of Supercars. Again, loads of interesting things to get stuck into. So be sure to subscribe if you want to be here for all that content. And of course, once 2024 gets underway, we'll be doing round previews, reviews, and plenty of news in between as well. Until then, have a great Christmas and New Year's, and I will see you on the flip side.